The 3 Bags of Gold. In the ancient city of Patara, when the world was still young enough to remember miracles, there lived a merchant whose fortune had turned as suddenly as the wind. Where once his ships had sailed heavy with silk and spices, now his warehouses stood empty. Where once his purse had jingled with gold, now it held only the memory of better days. This merchant had 3 daughters, and though poverty had stripped away their fine clothes and servants, it could not touch their beauty or their father's love for them. But there was a darkness creeping over their household that no love could hold back. For in those days, a girl without a dowry had no future. She could not marry. She could not keep her honor. The daughters knew it, the father knew it, and the knowledge sat between them at their meager meals like an uninvited guest. The eldest daughter would soon come of age, after her the second, then the third. And when that day came, when the last hope had flickered out, what then? The father lay awake at night, staring into the darkness, turning over in his mind possibilities too terrible to name. But there was another man in that city who also lay awake at night, though for very different reasons. He was the bishop of a nearby town, a man still young but already marked by a curious quality that seemed to shine from within. Those who knew him said he had the bearing of a king, though he owned nothing. He had inherited a great fortune from his parents, but it burned in his hands like coals until he could give it away. Not from duty, mind you, or even from pity, but from something else entirely. From a joy so fierce and bright it could not be contained. The bishop had heard of the merchant's plight, and one night, when the moon hung low and full over Patara, he wrapped his cloak around him, filled a leather purse with gold, enough for a dowry, and crept through the darkened streets like a conspirator on some holy errand. The merchant's house was modest now, its great doors long since sold. The bishop approached the window, which had been left open to catch the evening breeze. He smiled, a smile that held both mirth and mystery, and with a flick of his wrist, tossed the bag of gold through the opening. It landed with a satisfying thunk inside, and the bishop vanished into the night, his laughter silent, but somehow louder than any shout. The next morning, the merchant found the gold. He wept, he shouted, he praised God and called it a miracle, which of course it was, though not quite in the way he imagined. The eldest daughter would marry after all. A year passed, and the second daughter came of age. Again, the bishop crept through the night. Again, the bag of gold flew through the window. Again, the merchant discovered it at dawn and fell to his knees in wonder. But when the third daughter's time drew near, the merchant's gratitude had turned to curiosity, that dangerous, wonderful thing. Who was this mysterious benefactor? He must know. He must thank him. And so on the appointed night, the merchant kept watch. When the cloaked figure approached, moving swift and silent as a shadow, the merchant burst from his door and caught him by the sleeve. There stood the bishop, gold in hand, caught red-handed in an act of outrageous generosity. "My lord," the merchant gasped, "why do you hide yourself? Why this secrecy?" The bishop's eyes sparkled in the moonlight, not with embarrassment at being discovered, but with something else, something that understood the difference between humility and shame, between hiddenness and cowardice. "Because," he said, pressing the final bag into the merchant's hands, "it is God who provides, not I. I am merely the lucky fellow who gets to deliver it." And with that, he was gone, leaving the merchant standing in the street, holding not just gold, but something far more precious. A glimpse of a kingdom where kings delight in secret acts of love, where abundance flows from unexpected places, and where joy itself becomes a kind of warfare against despair. The daughters married, the merchant lived, and the bishop? They say he became a saint, though those who knew him best insisted he had always been one, just the sort who couldn't help but laugh at the wonder of it all. His name, of course, was Nicholas.
Welcome to the Imagination Redeemed podcast, where we follow the great stories further up and further in pursuit of the life of Christ.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Imagination Redeemed. I'm your host, Brian Brown, with Sarah Howell, and we're joined today by Joffrey Swait, who I had the good fortune of meeting at a conference we were both speaking at recently. Joffrey is a husband, father, poet, rugby coach, missionary to Brazil. That's possibly the most interesting resume since probably Malcolm Guite a few months ago.
Well, I'm also a pipe smoker, so hopefully that'll get me a little closer to Malcolm.
There we go. Well, I thought, thank you for being with us, Joffrey. I had this instinct that you would be a great conversation partner in talking about one of my favorite topics that we've never actually focused on as a standalone podcast, and that is joviality. This is a word we're not necessarily so familiar with. We are aware of its existence, but it's not something we talk about a whole lot. It's certainly not something we think of as a virtue to be cultivated. So my first question, to just toss it out to the room, I'm gonna bury the lead a little bit here and ask what this is before I ask about why should we care, because I think the why we should care is actually quite important. But that will be revealed, I think, as we talk about what it is. What is joviality? How is it different from joy? How is it different from silliness, or just sort of a cheerful personality?
I think one of the things, it has a lot in common with joy, because when Christians talk about joy, they need to have some sort of concept that includes the reality of suffering. And joviality also, I think, confronts suffering and wickedness. But so I think I would separate joviality from joy around feasting, or around that which is festal. So joviality would be the festival version of joy.
So joy is the wine and joviality is the feast where the wine is poured.
Yeah, I could go with that. Yeah. Lots of meat. I think there's a reason jovial people have red cheeks and talk loud. Right? Like that's wine and steak, right?
There's a song I absolutely adore by the Porter's Gate, and there's a verse that says, "When my table's bent with only greed and gold, and my grasping hands are afraid you won't provide, will you pour the wine that loosens up my hold? Set your table here with what truly satisfies." Um, I think that's a really beautiful lyric for the way that I imagine coming to that table, so to speak, for that festival as God pours the wine of joy.
And that kind of connects to this St. Nicholas story that this started with, right? Nicholas gave away all that he had, and yet somehow, because of the church, he had enough to give to people, and I'm sure to have glasses of wine.
I think it's important that I don't know, from my background, we would often talk about getting drunk in the spirit from that particular part of the Bible. I don't remember the reference for it. If you guys do, please chime in. But I've often thought about being drunk in the spirit. I had this conception as a kid that it meant that you kind of lost some of your faculties, right? There is an interaction, engagement, and acknowledge a relationship to our understanding of suffering that is paramount, inherent to our experience of joy on this side of the great story. And so the weight that someone carries, I think, doesn't get lost when, as the lyric says, the wine loosens up our hold. And it's not a naivete, and it's not a disregard. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think it's it's becoming more fully maybe ripe with age, to use a
Mm.
phrase, Brian, you've used before. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
Like there's a somberness to it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's not
Hmm.
just frivolity. Is that a word? Frivolity?
Frivolity.
Frivolity.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost see. So there's two things I heard in what you just said. One is maturity,
Mm,
and the other is something Joffrey already mentioned. This sense that joy that can hold suffering, which is, we talked about this. Sarah, you and Amy and Youngwon talked about this recently in your conversation about Tolkien's Ainulindale and this idea of hope that can hold grief. But they tend to come together, right? Maturity, both in the sense that maturity partially comes through suffering, but also in the sense that because time is involved,
mm,
suffering will inevitably happen. So there's a Lewis, in I think it was in The Weight of Glory, Lewis said something like, our merriment must be of that kind which exists between people who have from the outset taken each other seriously.
mm,
There's something so mature and sort of aged about that, and yet so relentlessly present to the people around you.
And it participates with people. You say the people around you, and that's something that all three of us have said things that are kind of assuming that or promoting that without saying it explicitly. So when you
Mm.
if being jovial is a festival mode, right? Then it's not just ennobling personally, but it's ennobling for those around you. Like if you think about being a host, right? So you're and this is where, like, thinking about wine. Well, certain people's conception, that you mentioned, being drunk in the spirit. Well, what is it to be drunk in the spirit? Because if it is to lose ourselves, that's not of God,
mhm,
right? God exalts us and lifts us up. And you even mentioned, Sarah, like still having our troubles kind of there, like we're aware of them, and
right.
yet we can feast and be jovial besides that. So, whatever rejoicing in wine means, whatever rejoicing in God and the things he gives us means, it's going to be something that, makes us all more ourselves, more what we ought to be.
Mm.
And that's going to push us out toward each other. Right. So
Mm,
I think an important part of the concept of jovial is it's not just the personal attitude, it's the backslapping.
Mm. So you can be joyful by yourself in prison, but to be
Yeah. I guess you could be
jovial.
jovial in prison. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think,
Oh, I wonder with like when they break out in song in prison, right? And there's multiple people coming together in that moment, and they're I don't know, that scene really
Mhm.
images, I think, what you were talking about, to me at least, Joffrey, where it's like the whole mood of the prison, even the guards, that changes, it shifts because it's contagious and it's participatory, and it creates an environment. It's not just within myself in a spiritual kind of meditative sense.
Right. Yeah. When I said you wouldn't be jovial in prison, I guess what I meant was in isolation.
Right.
yeah, there's got to be someone else. Yeah, there's got to be someone else to whom that overflow is directed.
Right.
Um, okay, so mature, able to exist in the face of suffering. Talked about festive yet temperate, not fully losing ourselves. I think we've used the word overflow several times. Certainly, we've
Mm,
talked about generosity several times. The sense of magnanimity, and it sounds like we're talking about a virtue more than a mood as well.
Yes.
You could maybe say I feel jovial, but it's flowing from something that is deeper and more permanent than your current feeling.
Or the more accurate use of the word attitude, right? Like it is a facing,
Mm.
right? So it's not as passing as a mood, but it is a way of confronting and moving through.
Yeah.
I would be interested to explore what you guys think about joviality being inherently youthful, not in sequential age. Like a 10-year-old is not going to necessarily be more jovial than an older person. Say, for instance, our conception of Santa Claus, right? In some
Yeah.
way, he's as old as it gets. So I'm not talking about chronological age, but youth, youngness. And then also tied to that, I don't know, we've been talking so much about hope contextually, Brian, in the rest of a couple of podcast episodes. This particular confronting, the way you said it, Joffrey, makes me think that there is a kind of faith undergirding joviality as its kind of like foundation. Um, we can dive into that a little bit more, or you could poke holes in it. But those two things are the things that just keep running in my head.
Yeah, so youthful in the sense of childlike as opposed to childish. So there's something about the way Tolkien describes Goldberry. I'm the exact phrase is escaping me, but it
She
like
was on
that.
my mind like just now. I mean,
Okay, well let's go
so
there.
yeah, you should talk about Goldberry.
Okay, well let's
It
go
just
there
came
because
into our heads.
there we go. Let's do it because that was gonna be my next question anyway. Like it's one thing to kick around abstract definitions for an abstract
Right.
word, and half of our listeners are already thinking, why are we even talking about this? So let's put a face on this. Who do you think of when you think of jovial, and let's just look at those characters. I mean, let's start with Goldberry since we're already there.
Yeah, I mean, so Tom and
Mm-hmm.
Goldberry, right, together. But I think there is something, and this is truly is just an exploration. I don't even know that I think this, but so there, I think there is something to be said for youthfulness in talking about joviality. But there is also something paternal, right? Because it's
Mm,
right, like you are bestowing when you're being jovial. The word itself comes from Jove, and we could connect it to Jehovah. I think there is something fatherly, and yet,
mm,
so, but there's something so lively
mhm,
about it that I think is really legitimate to bring in ideas of youthfulness. And with Goldberry, because she is female, right? So she's so fertile and bountiful,
mhm,
right? With a masculine figure like Tom, there's a sense in which men can be a little bit timeless,
mm,
but we I think are going to attach youthfulness to a female figure of generosity and bounty and liveliness, just because of biology. That is an
Hmm.
attempt. I don't even know if I think that.
That's the best
It's
kind of
really
thing.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm processing this. That's intriguing. Um,
Um, can I
yeah.
take it farther, see where we go? So I've been thinking a lot about Kierkegaard, actually. Um,
As
and
one does.
as one does. Uh, and for any Kierkegaardian, scholar who's listening to us, you can write us and tell me how wrong I am, please, because I know I'm not getting him right.
You've
But in
misunderstood everything.
he's actually saying the opposite. Thank you. Um, but he talks about in Fear and Trembling this person who believes in God, the religious man who has eyes both for the physical and the spiritual. And he says that this person has the expectation for the impossible and retains, he says, retains eternal youth because his stance vigorously belongs altogether to the finitude, to the now, not to the future, not to the past, but like he is fully present. And so I think that there's something to that kind of liveliness and presence. And that makes sense to me on the biological level for Goldberry being youthful and young because she is it's physically attached to her, right? Like she is physically in a bountiful state. And so that's what we image. That's the image that's going to come to our minds. But obviously Kierkegaard is talking more about the night of faith. So that's also something to like kind of bring in later. Maybe when we're talking about Tom and knighthood and and the valor that comes with this kind of youthfulness too. But I don't know. That's my stab at it. I don't know if that confirms things for you more, Joffrey, or starts taking you
I,
away from your thought.
I think it does, but it also like so you brought up the word immortality, and that
Mm,
was so right at the beginning when you were mentioning youthfulness. The first word that came to my mind is to possibly replace youthfulness and the ways it might be misinterpreted were immortality. But as soon as
mm-hmm.
as soon as that comes to mind, that word itself presents different problems, right?
Right.
But so one of the verses that's been on my mind a lot this year, and as we pursue glory,
Mm,
as Christians pursue glory, is to those who by patient continuance and well-doing seek for glory and honor and immortality, eternal life. So we should seek for glory. We should seek for honor. We should seek for immortality. And that
mm,
gives us eternal life. There's something that has been fascinating me. And one of the kind of returning to Tolkien, I don't know where in his canon he says this, but one of the just throwaways that he has that just absolutely just is my mind has never been able to let go of.
mm,
He says at some point that elves are immortal because they have the ever renewing flesh of children. In a sense, they're like children.
Mm.
So they're
yes.
always renewing. Um, and so, maybe immortality is youthfulness, and youthfulness is immortality. As long as one is youthful, one cannot die. I don't know, but it's I like that immortality as trajectory.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
let me tug on that then, because um, what I'm the picture that I'm getting between what the pair of you have said in the last few minutes is this overflow of uh, generosity, vitality, uh, youthfulness, if you will. Not that's it's coming almost more through someone than from them,
mm,
which kind of takes me back to both a number of different people have talked about the incarnation as sort of ultimate joviality. The actually one of my favorite writers about joviality was Luther, and he has some great Christmas sermons, um, all about just like everyone but the devil in the flesh laughs at the image of the incarnation, and there's overflowing joy, and I wonder if part of the reason that you can talk about joviality as an attitude or as a virtue is something that you can cultivate as opposed to something you're just sort of born with or not, um, is because you can talk about it as the overflow of Christ himself, the overflow
mm,
of the Imago Dei, body of Christ. I'm totally mixing bits of
mm,
the story of the people of God, right? But that this overflow of divine kingliness in you,
mm,
of which you are an image bearer and not the source.
Yeah, and the kingliness I think points to how a lot of this, I think I think a lot could be made of for out of the idea that we are vehicles. But I think that I would prefer to noodle at the idea that we are imitators, right? And
mm,
Mm.
okay, so this is a kingly attribute, and in a sense we are kings, and in a sense though we're not, we're definitely not the king, right? So we're imitating Christ, and in imitating Christ we try to be jovial. But I love, Brian, that you brought up that, I mean, jovial is a regal word. It
mm,
is like only a king can truly be jovial. If
Why?
to be
Why?
jovial is to be like, well, because I think it's the ultimate ring giving, right? I mean, I do tend to think
Mm.
etymologically. And I tell my students that my favorite fallacy is the etymological fallacy. So so
I'm just
I just
I'm
go
just pausing
backwards
to
until
I'm just pausing to appreciate that you have a favorite fallacy.
Yeah. But yeah, so I tend to bring, I tend to think of the words as being what their roots are, which is often helpful. Sometimes it's not, and it's not a fair way to debate with people. That's for sure. But jovial, I mean, I think we ought to connect it to Jove, and then as Christians, deeper through Jove and Father Christmas, and to Jehovah. And so, I would put some weight on just where the word has come from. But more deeply, I would put just the fact, if we accept that joviality is festal, is festival, and we think about how significant it was for a Lord to be able to give rings and to give meat, right? Like, this king is a good king because when we go to his feasts, there's meat, right? We live in an age now where we forget how important that is. Like, we get fat and we get wine when we go to be with this Lord. It's a lordly thing to bestow. And so I think it's a sign of the march of the gospel that more and more we can all behave in kingly fashions concretely, not just with you go queen, you go king, but like, no, I can give my kids meat to eat. And that's a pretty kingly thing. But then it overflows from there. But yeah, I'd want to attach it to this gift giving, to bestowing. Anyone who bestows is assuming some sort of sense of responsibility and care in a feudal way. I think I'd want to argue.
I love that image of bestowing blessing. As I mean, my kids are 10 and 8, and so I've got not an entire childhood behind me as a parent. I've got half of one, but in that half of one, one of the things that I think has shaped the character of our household for the benefit of our children more than almost anything else is this posture of the parents in general, and I think me in particular, as this figure bestowing blessing. A very, very different thing from, giving out sweets or buying their affections or something like that. But the sense of laughter and stability together that come from the parental figures, the father figure, having this posture of bestowing blessing with some word I'm looking for, seriousness and yet a twinkle in his eye.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I got to go further into I'm going to etymologically phallicize all over this for a minute because no, I was thinking about this. So yeah, jovial. Those of you who haven't read Michael Ward's Planet Narnia, Run, Don't Walk. But he talks about the jovial nature of not only the king, but the king at rest, the victorious king. To do a little more etymology, though, in Hebrew astronomy, the word for Jupiter, Jove, is Zedek, and Melchizedek literally means my king is Jupiter. So the priest king archetype in the New Testament, pointing to Christ, is someone whose name literally means my king is Jove. And the New Testament writers turn right around from that and call us a royal priesthood in the image of what?
Yeah.
Like, I know you can overdo the source of the words line drawing, but that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, that is. And I think that's why we should embrace things like concepts of Christ, like Lord of the Dance. Right. I think that a lot of Christians are afraid to put too much weight on things, and they should be. Never put too much weight on anything. But the question is, how much is too much weight? Right. And you don't have to rely on something to rejoice in it.
Mm,
Sometimes you are cooking a recipe that you know is temperamental. It's still worth making, right? And
mm,
sometimes the cake collapses. But so just don't base your life on that thing. But Christ is the Lord of the dance. Christ is the Lord of the feast.
mm.
Let's do it. There's great reason to think that, and let's live that way.
All of these things are just making me so happy to think about the image of what the elves are in J.R.R. Tolkien's
Mm.
world as we talk, because they I spend most of my time in the Silmarillion. I do not spend my time in the trilogy. So to me, the elves are very sad. They're they
Yes.
are very sad. They are burdened by the weight of time. And yet they are the ones through the trilogy that bestow rest, song, feast. They are the ones. Legolas is the one who laughs the most, out of most of the fellowship. That's often how he's portrayed. And so to think of, and I've always seen them as a very majestic kind of species.
Mhm.
um, and so it's fun to think about the way they cultivate joviality in those practices. They imitate sort of kind of kingly majesty as they do it. And they do it in a way that helps not only themselves, but others come into it and they bestow it. They bestow it on each other, and all these acts are bestowing acts. You can't feast alone. You have to bestow it on someone as they bestow it on you. You can't just sing a chorus by yourself. You have to sing along with each other. It's very participatory.
I think that that connects with what Brian was saying about earnestness. He didn't use the word earnest. He used a similar word, um, which I would say if I remembered it. Do you remember, Brian?
No.
And sincerity, or I love the word earnestness, but just that honesty, right?
Mm,
So there's we have to believe that noblesse oblige, right?
Mm.
That when if we have been given these things, it obligates us. And
mm,
the elves, I think, are a good example of that. They had a burden. They lacked the gift of men, and yet they soldiered on as long as they could in gratitude,
mm,
right? And I think that when you combine the idea that what you've been granted obliges you to earnestly share those things with gratitude, just gladness that you have those things and you get to share it. When you combine that, you end up with something jovial and expressive, and I don't think there's any way to be rich, as I think most of us are. I may struggle to pay my bills sometimes, but I own more books than most kings ever have.
mm.
So we're all rich, and so I mean, like, it's this ought to overflow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's one thing I think it can be a little bit challenging to look at a figure like Tom or Goldberry or the elves, or of course, um, Christ figures like Aslan in various stories. You can see a lot of these jovial elements, but there's also a little bit of an otherness to them
Right.
because they're always above us
Yeah.
on some level. So I think it can be easy to encounter those characters and instinctively love them and instinctively gravitate toward them, but also not necessarily feel compelled to follow their example because they're just a little bit too high above us or something. But it's if you've never tried this, uh, you like just try it sometime being the jovial person in a group, being the person who takes just an inordinate amount of delight in things
Mm,
worth delighting in. When you encounter someone like that who does that for you, this is so much of what we try to do at our events. Actually,
mhm,
we may do a gathering that has no formal teaching time, certainly doesn't have a cookie cutter takeaway, but we will just put people in a room together who can encounter others delighting in a work of poetry more than the person next to them knows how to do. Taking and then the elves do this, right? They just, why do they laugh so much? They've literally seen more grief than any of us will see in our lifetimes because of how long their lifetimes are. And yet they're so ready to laugh at the slightest joke. They feast all the time as though they'd never get tired of it. There's one person in a group channeling 1% of that can be such a force for good in the lives of the people around them.
So I say this leaning into scriptural ideas like, let us live up to what we've attained and considering others as better than ourselves. The person who behaves as you're describing, Brian, is better than us. The person who chooses to be jovial, to rejoice, to celebrate, to be an earnest appreciator, that person is being more noble, more godlike than we are. And then you talk about the distance that some of these figures, Aslan or the elves, they have from us. I think that actually is sort of built in to joviality. There is an assumed superiority. There's a hierarchy. But I think that what happens among Christians is that we continually elevate one over the other. Right? So if the three of us are hanging out and partying, then I come in all jovial and definitely better than you guys for whatever reason. Just some blessedness, okay? But that does something to Sarah, and whether that night or on another day, she then exalts and glorifies us by her joviality. Right? This is just the Christian life. But I definitely think that this is something that we should not be afraid of. Yes, it is better to be this way.
That's why it feels to me so connected with Kierkegaard's idea of faith. Because like some of us have more faith than others, but that faith strengthens other people's faith.
And you're talking more about like in a certain way of being, but just to like add to this and let you keep running. This is also like often is temporary. Sometimes I lack faith because I didn't have lunch.
Yes.
Right? That also affects us.
Yes. But yes, 1,000%. And Soren puts this in relationship to this concept of expectation. And so it's kind of like that practice of what do you expect from God, and is he your source of laughter? Because ultimately, right, like God is the one who laughs over his enemies because he's in a place of supreme power and majesty and joy. And Tom, when he slips on the ring and laughs at it because it's so inconsequential to him, that I want to think that gives Frodo and Sam this knowledge of like, oh, the ring does not have power over everything and everyone. It is not supreme. And so it's the sort of faith that there is a laughter in the supreme, right? And it's from the supreme God's laughter that we enter into that laugh and enter into that faith. And that contagion goes to other people as well. So I don't know if that's following what you're saying, but that's the way I'm interpreting the kind of words you're throwing out there.
We're at this point, we're talking about the deep comedy of the world, right?
Oh, you just used one of Sarah's favorite phrases.
Did I?
Yes.
Sarah, did you know, like I saw some of the notes.
Yes.
I saw the notes. Did you know that I am the voice of Peter Lightheart's book, Deep Comedy? If you go like Audible or the Canon app or whatever, I'm the reader.
Oh my goodness, I have to buy it right now as soon as we get done. It's my book is very, very annotated, but I have not.
Yeah.
I have not bought the audiobook
Yeah,
yet.
the audiobook is me, yeah.
Well,
What a delight!
okay, reader and voice. Yeah,
It's
I
like,
mean, we're it's sort
hold
of
on, don't ask me to embody Peter Lightheart right now.
well, it's sort of a crime that we haven't talked about Chesterton yet, but I mean, I think he says very much what the pair of you have been saying, that you're the default posture of the Christian, as hard as this can be, and as much as of an act of faith it is, and as much as it is something that we need to pray for and struggle with, so often we are victorious in Christ, and that is and ought to be our default posture toward the world. And the way that Chesterton frames it is, he says, man is more himself. Man is more man-like when joy is the fundamental thing in him, and grief the superficial. Melancholy should be an innocent interlude, a tender and fugitive frame of mind. Praise should be the permanent pulsation of the soul. It's Chesterton annoys me sometimes because he just says things so perfectly.
Why are we even talking? Let's
Why
just
are
go
we?
to Chesterton. Yeah.
Read Chesterton and Lightheart, and we would have been done.
Yeah, but I mean, that's so much of orthodoxy, right? That's
Yes.
so much his book Orthodoxy. Both. So okay, here's the question though, and I didn't ask it at the beginning. And if I were a good problem solution result framer, I probably would have. But I wanted to save it until we had a better sense of what we were looking at. Do we, in our day and age, have a joviality deficit?
We have a feasting deficit. We have a gratitude deficit. So although I haven't thought it through, we must have a joviality deficit. We don't have kingliness. We're very base and mean.
I'm thinking about this in the form of the obligation to have certain kinds of knowledge. Um, the responsibility to know certain things. I think in this particular moment in time, which is quite unlike other moments in time, there is this, especially for like my generation, or I think generations below me who are younger, there's this assumption that I have to know what's going on across the world. I have to know all the things that plague all of us. And if I don't, I'm not attending to the needs of my uh, humanity, to the world. There can be this tension point that happens. It's either like, I'm going to disregard it all and just live a little hedonistically where I just enjoy as much as I can and let it all go. And that to me would be that kind of revelry in a bad sense of the word, just shirk it all off. But then the other side is this overly somber. How can I feast? How can I enjoy? How can I be grateful when others are in lack? Or I'm complicit in the harm of other people because this chocolate might not have been created or cultivated without slave labor if I don't know where it's coming from, because you start realizing there's more slavery today than there was 300 years ago. It just looks different. And so when you're bombarded with all the information, I see the tension point of being happy clappy or overly somber.
And we get a lot of people in our Anselm community that I think have had probably more of the happy clappy experience, where it was a point of frustration with them that either grief, lament, some of these kinds of things didn't have a place in church, or didn't have the rich theology wasn't there to cope with them. But also that they had a sense of there was something attractive about something that was deeper and older and whatnot, but they tended to see those things nonetheless as stale and somber. And you can certainly imagine either of those two types of churches. The one that's very concerned with keeping your attention and entertaining you, and never talking about anything sad on the one hand, and then the one that's a bunch of 70 8-year-olds going through the motions on the other. And those are harsh stereotypes, but we've all been to both of those churches. What tends to mark the churches that don't end up in one of those extremes, I think joviality is a big part of the key to the difference. It brings the youthful vitality to the overly somber, but the depth and wisdom to the happy clappy. It's not just this candy tastes so good in the second. This is so rich to every part of the digestive process.
Yeah, I think you said earlier before we started recording something like it's celebration rooted in something rich, something deep, you know?
Mm-hmm. As every good celebration is, according to Josef Pieper.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes is the most celebratory book.
Praise God.
And I think that...
Okay, wait. Unpack that. Don't go past that too fast.
Well, I think even Soren would want to admit that, despite its melancholy, it is the book that encourages us to live life within time, to live life in cycles, and to drink wine.
Eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah. And so I wonder how much time is a part of this. Like you mentioned, Brian, these churches that, the church that doesn't go to one pole or the other. Well, what do they have in common? Well, I'd want to toss in they're probably a lot more likely to have a robust sacramentology.
Mm-hmm.
But that would also associate, I think, with having a robust sense of time, and of whether they're celebrating festal days or not. I don't think there's any way to live in harmony with creation and being a steward of creation without being aware of time and cycles. And I think that we haven't really explored this aspect of it, but that's got to feed into joviality, right? Because it feeds into festival and feasts. And so we can't, there is a time for, and we can't be having festivals and feasts all day, every day.
Right.
Maybe we could say we can be jovial all the time, right? So, yeah. But I do, but that's why I would say Ecclesiastes is that book, because it puts us in time and cycles and harvest and life and death. It says things are really melancholy. And it also says drink wine.
If I could also tie that back in or wrap up my own thoughts, I guess, with what I was saying, I was focusing, I think, more on culture proper and young culture, my generation and younger. And you guys are bringing in the culture of the church. I think it's just maybe helpful for at least me to tie things down there and say a lot of my generation and younger are not a part of institutions and they don't see the value of institutions. And to me, something clicked where that means in a lot of ways in this abstract mass information world, they're abstracted into timelessness that leads them to a sort of not hedonism or depression of like over somberness. And so I would like to tie that there's something about the institution and the time that is housed in something like the church, and especially when the church recognizes the seasons and the times and the festivals like you're talking about, Joffrey. I just wanted to throw that in there to...
Okay, I've got 3 thoughts that don't have anything to do with each other, but that's your fault, both of you, for saying such interesting things. The first is way back to the idea of compassion fatigue, and we're just exposed to the suffering of a globe instead of the suffering of a village, and our minds weren't meant to handle it. I know, a lot of us are tempted to try to bear the sorrows of the whole world emotionally, and perhaps in terms of guilt. Or the alternative is to sort of try to shrug it off and keep it all at a distance. Those are the 2 most common reactions that I see. In neither case, though, do I see a corresponding desire to bear the gratitude of all the goodness in the world.
Mm.
Right. So maybe if your tendency is to try to absorb all of the suffering of the world and why is everything so bad and the problem of evil and all of this stuff, maybe try to mirror it with taking an accountability for the gratitude that you ought to have for all of the goodness in the world. See how overwhelming that is. That's a random thought that I wouldn't have had except for you two. Second is, theology of time. Actually, you know what? These last two tie together, so I'm going to make it two things instead of one, or instead of three. The last time we did our Imagination Redeemed conference, which was 2022. The whole thing was theology of time, a whole weekend on theology of time, and Paul Buckley from Theopolis came out and talked to us about Psalms extensively, and we sort of built the whole weekend around the Psalmic imagination as a result. But one of the things that we observed along the way is that it's so. As a Christian, the only opportunity we have to live into our identity, however you want to frame your agency, is in the present, of course. But we tend to make ourselves we tend to make ourselves the slaves of either past or future, either through our hopes or our fears or our bitterness or our nostalgia, constantly making the present the slave of the past or the future, or we try to ignore them and therefore make ourselves the slave of them in a different way, as opposed to connecting to eternity through the present in a way where we are connected to the cloud of witnesses in the present and future and the meta narrative of God's work in human history and these healthier ways of inhabiting time. I read an article recently, I think it was in the New Yorker, about youth culture, I guess, in South Korea, and how, I'm just going on the articles. I don't know if this is true, but beyond what the reporter said, but it was talking about how that culture has become so disconnected from not only parenthood, but even sex to a point where basically everyone is just trying to extend childhood for as long as possible. One of the things that they are noticing is that not only is childhood getting extended as long as possible, how young the version of childhood is keeps getting younger. So a lot of coffee shops apparently are built around almost more of a Hello Kitty kind of vibe, lots of pinks and pastels and very bright colors. And so basically the more you try to hang on to youth, the more childish you become. Whereas the more you lean into a sense of not resignation, but acceptance of the goodness of the past and present in your identity, the more you are actually able to live with agency in the present.
I think if I can throw Kierkegaard back into it, I'm pretty sure you have to become the knight of resignation before you become the knight of faith, which is this whole other big move, right? Just to say, I agree.
I love that that we've gone from Kierkegaard to Soren back to Kierkegaard. Yeah. The timeless thing that Sarah brought up is really important, and then Brian, you fleshing that out. I think that and bringing up the tyranny of the past and of the future over the present, right? And we want to live in the present. And I think there's also a sense in which the present has its own tyranny, right? So our refusal to look at the past or to look at the future puts us in this place where the present has too much power, right? The present cannot be itself unless it's informed by the past and the future.
Right. Otherwise, you just end up wearing the "I support the current thing" T-shirt.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And because we can't look ahead, we can't age. Right. So there's this fear of death in Hello Kitty cafes. So we do have to. So originally we went off on these tangents talking about, is there a crisis in joviality? And there must be, because I think instinctively time was brought up by all of us.
Mhm.
We have to live life in a way where we have to look at the passage of time. So having children is a big one, right? As soon as you stop
Mhm.
having kids, and we already live in, under all these forces that push us away from acknowledging time. But at least when you
Mm.
have kids, right? Like, your kid is no longer 2.
Mm.
Now he's 5. Now he's 10, right? You
Wow.
have to confront that. Um, and obviously a church life also plays into that. But even at church, we fight that. We all go to church with the same generation, right? We
Right.
we you know we avoid going to church with people who are very young and people who are very old from our perspective. But a family where you're still with a spouse of your youth, and your kids are getting older and possibly taller than you, that'll that'll make you confront time, the present, bound, like attached to
Mm.
the past and the future. And I think that's got to be a basic ingredient, if we go back to Ecclesiastes, I guess, for us to
Mm.
be able to have festivals and to be jovial.
Yeah.
So, follow-up question to that. You're the most experienced parent in the room. The remind me, do you have only boys?
No. I have my oldest and my youngest are girls.
Okay.
So I have a girl who's about to graduate college and a girl who's 12.
So then uh what does it look like for you and your wife as you have brought these kids up to instill a posture of joy and joviality in them? What does that look like from a parenting perspective for you?
Well, certainly modeling it, right? And Brian, you were talking about that earlier. But we've been, we are part of a Christian tradition that is not always that attentive to the calendar. So we have been attentive to the calendar.
Mm.
And we've made efforts. So, not only, paying attention to the calendar of the church in the West, but even, like, well, let's elevate Easter more. Right. So
Mm.
Christmas is such a big deal for everybody, but Easter is not that big of a deal. Well, in the story we want to tell our family, let's make Easter this huge deal. Let's exalt it a little bit more. So yeah, we've actually always been very conscious of time. I would even say that we've minimized birthdays. We don't celebrate really any civic holidays. Right. Like July 4th. Okay. Thanksgiving to me is sort of an American religious holiday. Like but there are a lot of holidays that plus we homeschool. That made it easy. A lot of holidays that we don't pay attention to that are on the American calendar. And just for the record, we ignore the Brazilian ones too, including Children's Day. We're supposed to get presents on Children's Day because we want to tell our kids the story of
Mm.
Christ rules over time, and the
Mm.
church has this. This is how we read time. This is how we interpret
Mm.
time. And so our kids' lives were always shaped, but shaped in a feastly way, around how we lived and how we sailed through time together. So as they got older, I think we also tried to inculcate hospitality and nobility in them. Like we have always used the word nobility earnestly and openly.
Mm.
Right? Like we don't try to hide it behind a more modern word. We've insisted in teaching our kids how to be noble, and there's a certain Swadian definition, a familial definition of what that is. We also always made a point, and this is the last thing I'll say, of having parties.
Mm.
One of our party traditions started every summer. We would have a party where we invited everyone we knew. Back when we lived in South Carolina, that one started, many years ago when we were out of money. We had $300 to our name, and decided to spend those $300 on a party. And that was such a blessing that every summer after that, we had a party where we invited everyone we knew. So our kids grew up seeing that as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we're sort of early, a little bit earlier on. It seems like a similar trajectory, and in my family, and a lot of what the Anselm Society has become has grown out of us and others around us. Leaning into the church calendar more, leaning into just as more of that sort of mature, aged in the good sense, posture of we don't have to make this all up ourselves.
Right.
And we can share great, good and true and beautiful things from the past with our children as they were shared with us, or as we wish they'd been shared with us.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you find those riches as an adult.
Well, and you talking about sharing actually reminds me of something that I wish I had said explicitly, so I'll say it explicitly now.
Sure.
As much as possible, involving the kids in everything we're doing, right? Obviously,
Yes.
there are some things that we do without the kids, and sometimes the kids are going to go off on their own. But when the dudes come over to hang out, to play some game or to smoke cigars, letting the kids be around that for a while and letting them naturally drift away from it. Not allowing them to be spoiled or rude, but just participating all the time as much as possible.
I love that for a million reasons. Partly because that was my experience growing up, and I just am so grateful for it. So incredibly grateful. But I'm thinking about Dr. Grace Hammond spoke at our retreat for Anselm back in September, and she was talking about temperance. And particularly, I believe, whether it's feasting or abstinence, she said something tantamount to temperance keeps time. It's the discernment and judgment to know what is this time asking of you. And so there is a beauty to the church calendar, and there are formalized, housed, literally, right, in time, these institutional things. But it is also, I think to your point you made before too, Joffrey, it is allowing yourself to be exposed to other people, other generations. And so the question, what is this time asking of you? The more that's varied, the more that's bringing in the whole body of Christ, not just me, myself, and I, and my friend my same age. Everyone is blessed.
And just side comment, connecting temperance to time is not only correct, it is another wonderful use of the etymological fallacy. Sorry, good note.
Well, that's kind of a perfect note to wind down on. Any parting thoughts from either of you, especially along the orders of other experiences with joviality, or advice or exhortations for our audience?
I guess I would exhort people to host a party soon that neither they nor their spouse stress about. So if that looks like the backyard, then but yeah, host a party soon.
Well said. Sarah?
Piggybacking off of you, Joffrey, but more in a dispositional sense, you can't fake joviality. It has to flow from a life lived in God's abundance, cultivated over time, right? Through the faithfulness in ordinary moments. So don't be in a rush. Don't complicate things and put too much pressure on yourself. Actually delight in God and relax. That's where I need to start. So that's what I'll exhort other people to do too.
Nice.
The fact that telling people to relax doesn't help them relax has never stopped me from telling them. That's usually what I tell my students when they're trying to speak in public. It's like, okay, take a deep breath. I know that being told to relax is not gonna, but I have to say it.
Yeah. And I do think that imitating, like you said, Joffrey, is so important. So if you don't have someone in your life that you can specifically think of who has that kind of laughter in their spirit, go read about it somewhere. Go read The Lord of the Rings, or go read the Bible and think about God's laughter and how he presides over everything. Go read Jesus as he makes hundreds of gallons of wine as his first miracle and meditate on that. The life of God's abundance is overflowing, and you don't have to make it up. Just go enjoy it, and the imitation will follow.
I will throw in my last thing, which is just to connect our conversation today explicitly with our winter quarter as we go through essentially the seasons of Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, into really up through and just beyond Candlemas. This is like once you get through Christmas, there's this huge drop off for pretty much everybody, and all of a sudden you are in the very real, at least in most parts of this country, darkness and cold and constriction of winter. And a lot of our conversation and a lot of our events as the winter goes on are going to be oriented toward how we as Christians can live in the realities of that, but also transcend them and bring Christ's victory into those things. So I would, echo what both of you have said. In the face of all that, say that we, as the Anselm Society, want to walk through that with you as our listeners. But don't underestimate what you can do, being the Goldberry in the group or the elf in the group. I want to walk us out with two quotes that one of which just because it has to be said, and the other is which is Lewis saying, "Joy is the serious business of heaven," and the other, which is from one of Luther's Christmas sermons, which I think pretty much just encapsulates half of the best stuff that each of you, Joffrey and Sarah, have said over the course of this conversation. Here's what Luther says: "Faith unites the soul with Christ, just as a bride is united with her bridegroom. By this solemn vow, as the Apostle Paul teaches, Christ and the soul become one flesh. By the wedding ring of faith, he shares in all the sins, death, and hell of his bride. His righteousness is greater than all sin, his life stronger than death, and his salvation more invincible than hell." We are, as St. Nicholas reminded us on our opening story, not the happy clappy people who have never experienced suffering. We are not the people who are always in a good mood. We are those who get to be the lucky fellow who delivers the overflow of the goodness of God to most immediately the people right next to us.
Amen.
Sarah, Joffrey, thanks for joining me today.
What a pleasure.
Thanks, Brian.
To be continued.
The Imagination Redeemed podcast is a production of the Anselm Society. It's easy to see this world as disenchanted and to give up hope that there's more. But you were made to see the world with the eyes of heaven and to live a bountiful life that participates in the life of God, like in the great stories. To help make this show possible, go to anselmsociety.org/podcast25 and make a donation. The Anselm Society is a place where you can come in and experience that beauty, joyful celebration, and ancient wisdom, and go out renewed, bringing that life to your vocation, home, and church. Learn more at anselmsociety.org and join us next time as we pursue a renaissance of the Christian imagination together.